Awesome. So good afternoon for the third time. They say three times is a charm. So good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the ninth episode of our ninth session in our Corona Collaboration Culture series. Today, we're going to be talking about how do we become anticipatory as HR leaders. And before I hand you over to Keisha to introduce herself, let me just take us through a few guidelines. So first, I'd like to welcome our participants. We have on the line local participants from the Bahamas, some of which are dialing in from other islands. So thank you for taking time out of your schedule today. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule, my fellow Nasuvians, for also tuning in. And I also want to highlight a few international participants. So the C3 series has been fortunate enough to also impact the US, Spain, Malaysia, Tanzania, and I also think Britain too. So if there are any international participants tuning in, I would like to thank you for taking time out of your schedule also. My name is Wellington Hepburn. I'm the president of Wellington Hepburn International, and WHI is a company that really just focuses on making people better. That's really what it is. Whether it's through book authoring, whether it's through motivational speeches or keynotes, whether it's through occasional coaching. We do a variety of different things, both locally and internationally, to help people be better. I'll borrow a phrase from one of my mentors, faster, further, longer, stronger. And that's essentially what we're about. So a few meeting guidelines. So the general flow for today is that I will kick off the event. I'll hand it over to Keisha. Keisha will tell us a little bit about our collaboration between WHI and her suite of companies. I'll then tell you a little bit about the C3 series, what we've done, what we're doing, and why it's important. And then I will take us through a 45-minute presentation for a model that WHI has built that helps us to become anticipatory as HR leaders. After that, we'll have a 20 to 25-minute Q&A session where we get to hear from each of you. And Keisha and myself will field your questions, get your questions answered. And if there are more questions than we can answer on the live line, we will take those and provide FAQ documents. FAQ document with answers. And then we'll wrap up, all right? So a few things to bear in mind. We do have a chat. So as we go through this session, please put your questions in the chat. I don't want you to forget any of your questions. So feel free to pen them there and we'll make sure to get them answered. As we present, I would ask that you please keep your mics on mute. We would like to get through the content as best as we can. And we really want everyone to learn and grow. And if you take your mics off of mute, sometimes it creates a lot of background noise that can be very distracting. If you are in front of a PC and when we get to the Q&A segment, if you want to audibly ask your question, all you have to do is press space on your keyboard and it temporarily unmutes your mic. If you are using a cell phone, then there should be a button on the screen to allow you to temporarily unmute your mic. And last but not least, I want to mention to you that this session is being recorded. If any of you would like to go back and watch it again, it will be posted on the WHI YouTube channel and also on my website. We're all about helping individuals learn and grow, so if you don't catch it now, you can catch it later. And we're happy to provide that to you. Two other things I want to mention. Over the last several months, there have been some instances of what's been called Zoom bombing, where individuals come on Zoom meetings, they don't really need to be there, and they do less than savory things. If that happens during this meeting, we don't anticipate it, but if it does, I will end the meeting immediately. As a part of the registration process, I have all of your email contacts, and within 5 minutes, I'll send you a communication to let you know how we will proceed with the webinar. Okay, so before I hand it over to Keish, there's one more thing that I'd like to mention. Right now, the world is going through a lot of change. So not only are we going through change as it relates to COVID, but In the US, there's been a tremendous amount of change and a tremendous amount of outcry surrounding what recently has happened with George Floyd. So I just want us to take a quick moment, a quick 5 seconds of silence, just in memory of his life and also to pay respect to what is happening in the US right now. WHI would like to say that we're in support. All lives do matter. And I just really want to remind us as HR leaders that this is a tough time for us, but let's not lose sight of what our focus is. Our focus is to support our organizations, whether it's to support the leaders that drive our organizations, or whether it's to be there to support the employees that also support the strategy for our companies. Now is the time where we have to put our feet forward and show really by providing true leadership during this difficult time. But I just wanted us to provide a quick moment of pause to say that we are in support of what is going on in the US in terms of the All Lives Matter movement. And we wish all of our US counterparts the best as they navigate this difficult time. So Keisha, over to you.
Thank you, Wellington. Good afternoon, everyone. Like Wellington mentioned, this series, the 9th in the C3 series, is being collaborated between WHI, Dragonfly Media, and Integrity Risk Services. Integrity Risk Services and Dragonfly Media are 2 out of 3 companies that are in a suite of companies that I'm the director for. And Dragonfly Media is a multimedia company doing services such as videography, photography, digital and printed marketing material. And Integrity Risk Services, we provide insurance consulting services, claims assistance, and verification of employment services. So we were very happy to join in with WHI to collaborate for these sessions, because we feel that, me as an HR professional, we feel that it is important that we continue to learn, we continue to grow, we continue to give back, not only to persons within our profession, but on a broader scale, that we impact persons that we deal with every day, whether locally or internationally. So like Wellington said, we have been moving ahead, working on the C3 series along with other partners, but WHI is doing a wonderful job in ensuring that learning is continuous and ongoing. And we are just so happy to collaborate during this session, as well as the sessions for the month of June, to bring to light some key HR learning aspects, as well as to bring to light some other areas that I would have mentioned of my personal business, which is Dragonfly Media, as well as Integrity Risk Services, which you will hear more about later on during this session. So Wellington, back to you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Keisha. So, Keish would have talked about it a little bit, but the C3 series is what you see on the screen. So the whole crux behind this was really to provide a learning platform during COVID-19 for us to learn, to grow, and to develop, even in the midst of a crisis. So all of the sessions from April 5th straight up to the 7th of what are the sessions that we would have covered. And really, these are topics that needed to be discussed so that we could be effective in terms of navigating this crisis. We were thrusted into knowing how to deal with virtual teams and manage productivity. We were thrusted into working from home. I spoke to a few professionals and they're like, well, in the 20 or 30 years that I've been employed, I've never experienced a change like this. As a result of COVID-19, there were some legal implications that we now need to consider. How do we manage our health? Someone said to me that, they're home now, they're doing Zoom meetings from 9 until 4. And because of that, they're more sedentary. You layer in the fact that you're closer to your fridge, so you're eating more, so now you're gaining weight. So these are all topics that we've tabled to help us become better. And from the 7th to the 5th is the remainder of the series and some of the things that we'll be discussing. So feel free to tune in. The sessions are free. They are provided also on the YouTube page in case you missed them. But please feel free to avail yourself, and let's see how we can learn and how we can grow together. All right. So now we're going to transition into the presentation that I want to share with us today. And like I said, I'll present from now until about 1:55, so for the next 40 or so minutes. As I go through the presentation, please feel free to put your questions in the chat, because I wouldn't want for you to forget your questions, because after this, we do have 20 to 25 minutes of Q&A that Keishla will lead us through. So let's get into it. What is 4sight? The first thing I want you to do, for those of you that have notes in front of you or maybe a cell phone in front of you, is to write the following. Companies and leaders that anticipate always succeed. Full stop. I'll say it again. Companies and leaders that anticipate always succeed. Period. And that includes us as HR. Companies and leaders that anticipate always succeed, and that includes us as HR. Now, everywhere I go, I take my family. Now, don't tell my wife, because these photos are probably about a year to a year and a half old. So she would surely have my head. And it's kind of funny because as soon as I put the slide up, I hear Sienna shouting upstairs, right? She's like, Daddy, you need to change these photos. But this is my family. Listen, you know, when you hear me speak, you hear of the professional man and, you know, what Wellington has been allowed to do through God. But this is the why. This is always the why, and this will always be the why. It is for my family. So know that every model, every workshop, every schematic, everything is for the advancement of my family. And also, hopefully, to not have Sienna shouting from upstairs to change these photos. So let's get into our workshop goals. So today we're going to talk about 5 high-level themes. 1, how do we define organizational anticipation? WHI has coined the phrase 4sight. The number 4 in front of sight is significant because it is a 4-step model that helps us to become anticipatory. We're going to talk about the importance of being anticipatory. You've heard me say it already. Individuals that anticipate are always successful, point blank. We're going to talk about a real-life example of anticipatory success. And we're going to contrast and dig into the 4 levels of the 4sight model and how, if we start to shift our thinking, we can start becoming anticipatory and more anticipatory, both for the future and also immediately after this call or after this webinar. So let's get into it. Let's lay the groundwork. On the screen, you see a schematic. And you don't have to digest it all. I don't expect for you to read it. It's a lot. But what I do want you to pay attention to is the upper right quadrant. In the upper right quadrant, we have a few industries that have quite literally exploded as a result of COVID-19. Online shopping, telehealth, online doctor's visits, things like Netflix, media and entertainment. Social media has been huge. Individuals need an outlet to express how they feel, especially during crisis. But what I want us to talk about is this space called video chats and online conferencing. And it's very interesting. The reason why it's interesting is if you look at the chart that's on the screen. Zoom, the company that probably everyone has used or will be or is using their name probably every single day, pre-COVID-19 was not that successful of a company. Zoom had about 10 million users on a daily basis as at December 2019. As a result of COVID-19 and as a result of their ability to anticipate market changes and ready themselves for those market changes, as a result of COVID-19 and at the end of Q1 2020, their subscribers, this is incredible, their viewership, their utilization is now up to 200 million users every day. I can't even do the percentage increase on that. Here's the takeaway. The takeaway is that they anticipated some changes in the market and they positioned themselves to be successful. What's important here too is that we have to note that they didn't only position themselves on the business and operational side, they also needed HR to be in lockstep and to move forward with them in order for their entire organization to succeed. There's a quote that goes around that says, the only real differentiator between companies and long-term success is the people that you have. When you think about Zoom, GoToMeeting, WebEx, all these online conferencing tools, the technologies are slightly different, but they provide the same thing. They really provide the same thing. So when you think about what makes them different, it's the ingenuity, it's the people behind the technology that we experience and how they roll out that technology to us. Here's the interesting point I want to point out to you relative to Zoom. Because of their ability to anticipate and be a market leader, their market capitalization, their total valuation for their company now is almost $50 billion. Let's look at that in comparison to some other companies. Zoom is now worth more than Southwest, Delta, United, Air France, and all of these airlines combined. Delta alone is an incredibly successful company. So I want you to put that in perspective. Here's the takeaway. I would encourage you to write this down. Those companies and those leaders that know how to anticipate when, how far, how deeply, in which space will succeed. Even in crisis, there are winners and losers. But I strongly believe that it is in our ability to anticipate. And in the case of Zoom, it's not just operational anticipation, but it's also how did they anticipate in terms of leading, developing, and utilizing their people, which deals with us as HR. Let's continue. So when we talk about 4sight, what are we really even talking about? And for this, I'd like for someone to take their mic off of mute and just read this definition for me, please. It can be any one of you. I would greatly appreciate it. Who's gonna take me up on my offer?
Hi, Wellington.
Hi.
It's LaShanta.
Hey, LaShanta, appreciate you.
Anticipation is a blend of awareness, experience, and instinct. Having an anticipatory mindset puts you one step ahead of the competition.
It's all about thinking about the future. Thank you, LaShanta. When we talk about 4sight in this presentation, we're talking about maintaining your current level of operation, but always being on tap, always understanding, always exploring what the future needs. My wife and kids and I went to bed last night, and even as I was laying in bed, my mind was thinking, what is the next thing? The C3 is going to end. What is the next thing? What is the next thing for 2021? What is the next thing for 2022? Because it's all about anticipating and being ahead of the market, ahead of your competition, ahead of, if you're very good at it, ahead of even what your operational leaders are thinking about. Because if HR is meant to be an enabler, we should be advising the business. Well, wow, Hepburn, I never thought about that. But now that you brought it up, that is important. So when we think about 4sight, that's what we're talking about. Let's have another volunteer. I'd like for someone to take their mic off of mute and read this for me, please. Greatly appreciated. Chantel, do you mind helping me out?
Good afternoon. Employees of an anticipatory organization understand that those who can see the future most accurately will have the biggest advantage. They know that you cannot change the past, but you can shape the future based on the actions you take in the present. They actively embrace future disruptions, problems, and opportunities.
Absolutely. There are two takeaways from this definition. The first is that we're focused on the future. And when we think about the future, sometimes some of us as leaders, as HR professionals, we get stuck where we are because we don't have complete information. I'm sorry if no one has told you, no decision you make, you have 100% of the information that you need. So if moving forward because you don't have complete and 100% accurate information is something that's blocking you, you need to realize that that is a reality that we operate in. I'm sure that all of us felt it as a part of COVID-19. We had to plan, we had to strategize. Sometimes we didn't even necessarily know what was going to happen the next day. You implement a strategy now and then tomorrow is obsolete because something changes. So when we think about foresight, it's less about having complete clarity, but it's more about having the unction, the desire, the willpower, the drive to still think ahead and forge ahead regardless. The last thing I want to comment on this definition is that individuals that manage foresight well, even if it's a disruption, even if it's a problem, we still actively embrace it. Because in every problem, there's an opportunity. That's actually something good to write down. In every problem, there's an opportunity. I can't remember who was the researcher who said it, but I know the late Dr. Miles echoed it in a lot of his presentations about vision and purpose. He said, if you want to be successful, find a problem and create a solution. Every successful business, every successful strategy is hinged on a problem. So don't shy away from problems because it could be a next breakthrough. It could be the next key driver of success for your organization or for your department. So why is foresight important? I'll bring all these up on the screen. Let's talk through them quickly. Foresight is important because HR will never achieve its full potential being reactive. Ouch, myself included. We're going to get into some research that talks about how business leaders feel, whether we're proactive or reactive, but we can never, ever, ever, ever be fully successful operating in a reactive mode. We have to lift our heads up. We have to look to the future. We have to partner with the business and understand what business priorities are and make sure that we maintain, like I said, our current level of operation, but we're also looking to the future. We're also scoping. We're also anticipating. HR cannot partner effectively without anticipating. Business leaders anticipate. They anticipate customer changes. Well, let me put it this way. If they're good business leaders, they anticipate. They anticipate market changes. They anticipate global changes. They anticipate changes within the organization. They anticipate strategy changes. So if the leaders and the business and the modus operandi that we're supposed to support is anticipation, we have to anticipate also. And we can't be reactive. Let me tell you why. The reason we can't be reactive is that the business is looking to us to anticipate possibilities and opportunities that relate to our people. Well, you know, Hepburn, 5 of my people left last week. That's 67% of my department, and we're going into peak season. What do you think we should do? Well, have you actually thought about these employees? Because as a part of our talent development program and our succession program, we have on record that these employees have been actually developing skills in your area for the past year. Wow, Hepburn, I didn't know that. Let's talk some more about that. So a key role of HR is being able to take disparate pieces and to bring them together and identify possibilities for the business proactively. And then the fourth point here is that the pace of business is quickening. And because business is quickening so much, there's a greater need for us to be anticipatory. The more change you have, the more prepared you need to be. Someone said to me as a part of this COVID-19 crisis, they said, boy, Hepburn, I've realized that now my business had no plan to deal with this. None. LaShanta's husband, Derek Smith, would talk about, risk management and business continuity. But when we think about the pace of business, we have to be more anticipatory because things are changing quicker. So if we don't anticipate the information, the stance, the perspective that we have is even becoming more obsolete more quickly. So having foresight is critically important. Let's look at a situation overview. So let's do a short, quick poll, a quick poll. And Keisha, I'd like for you to help me with this because, since I'm in presentation mode, I can't see the chat. But for those of you that at each stage, as I get to it, if this stage relates to you, I just want you to put a note in the chat that says, me, yes, that's me, that's my company. So we'll know generally who falls into the category. And this is not to call anybody out. This is just to see where we stand as participants on the call. So which of you would say that you anticipate business needs minimally? We kind of go about doing what we have to do. We run our regular processes, but we don't really anticipate that much. Just drop a note in the chat for me if that's you. Tell the truth and shame the devil now. Don't lie. How many notes do we have in the chat, Keish?
We have 2 persons for B, 1 person for A, 2 for C.
Okay.
Oh, they're coming in quick and fast now.
Awesome. Awesome.
All right.
B would be that you anticipate needs sometimes. C would be that you anticipate needs consistently. And D would be that, almost all the time, I am leading. I anticipate needs. So tell us where you fall, generally speaking. And Keith, you could just let us know generally where you think it stands. You don't have to count up each one.
Look at C, the majority of persons are responding to C.
Okay. All right. That's good. That's good. Very good to hear. Awesome.
C and B.
Okay. Between B and C?
Yes.
All right. Between B and C. Not surprised. So now let's look at the research. So relatively recent research. It's 2018, so it's not too far back. That was done by Development Dimensions International, the Conference Board, and Ernst & Young. They did a very exhaustive study where they looked at almost 30,000 leaders across the globe. And these leaders represented different generations, countries, genders, whether they're high potential or not, industries, and levels. And included in that almost 30,000 group of leaders was about 2,500 HR professionals and almost about 3,000 organizations. And they found some, and if you want to get this research, let me know, I can send it after. But they found some very interesting observations that I want to comment on. When they did their research, they did a comparison between what business leaders felt and what HR leaders felt. So let's look at what the business leaders came up with. And based on the research, they grouped HR professionals into 3 categories. Either HR professionals are a reactor, they are a partner, or they are an anticipator. A reactor is exactly how the name describes. They're usually reactive, just focused on current operational processes, never really lifting your head up to see the forest for the trees. A partner would be someone who works alongside the business, actively partners with them to drive business and operational strategies. And then an anticipator is someone who has this foresight mindset that thinks ahead, not just what is in front of them, but 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years down the line to see what the business might need. So this is what the business came up with in terms of percentages. Business leaders said that 41% of the time, HR individuals are reactive. About half of the time we partner, and 11% of the time we anticipate. Ouch. Now let's layer in what our view was, because they did a blind research study where they kind of kept the results separate. So they said, this is what business leaders felt, this is what HR department leaders felt, and then they compared the two. So in terms of HR leadership, this is how HR felt. So HR felt that they were reactive 21% of the time, but the business said that twice that amount of the time you are reactive. Wow. HR felt that they were partnering 62% of the time, but the business said, hold on, buddy, let's talk about it a little bit. Actually, it's more like 48% of the time. And HR felt that they were partnering almost 20% of the time, but the business said it's only 11. Here's the takeaway. There's a gap. There's a gap between what the business feels HR is doing and what we are doing as HR. HR feels that they are reactive 20% less than what the business feels. But if HR is there to support the business, that's a major concern, because the business feels that almost half of the time we're reactionary. HR feels that we partner 14% more than what the business feels we partner. So here we are doing all this stuff, thinking we're adding all this value, and the business is saying, well, no, not really. You need to do more. And in terms of anticipating, we feel that we anticipate much more, significantly much more than what the business feels. There's a gap. So let's talk about how we close that gap. This is the model. So now we're getting into the meat and potatoes. We have 20 more minutes. The 4sight model is a 4-step model that teaches us how to become anticipatory as HR professionals and leaders. The model compares short-term focus to long-term focus, and it also compares whether our focus is driven by HR department needs or whether they are driven by company needs. The model starts at functioning, it progresses to foreseeing, and I'll talk about what each one is. It then goes over to forecasting, and the apex of the model is fulfilling. So said another way, if you are an HR department that has a short-term focus and your focus is primarily on the needs of your department, you are only functioning. Sorry, but you are. Because you have not tapped into the fact that there are some business priorities that you need to support. Well, child, I need to do this and I need to do that and I need to make sure my department's set up properly and these people ain't gonna kill me. You're functioning because you're only focused on the fact of what your department needs. If you have a short-term focus, but you're starting to understand what some of those business needs are that your organization has, then you're in the category of what's called foreseeing, because you're maintaining your current level of performance, but you're starting to rise above and realize that the business has some needs that need to be satisfied. So you're starting to foresee those needs. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're planning for them or executing on them, but it means that you are aware that they exist. Now we switch to long-term focus. If you have a long-term focus and you are focused on your HR department and primarily on the needs of your HR department, so you know that the business has some needs, but the primary focus still for you is, yeah, those needs exist, but my focus really is how are those needs gonna impact my department? I wanna make sure my department's straight. I wanna make sure my people taken care of. And that is my focus. If you fall into that department-driven long-term category, then you are forecasting. So you understand that the business has some needs, but you're still more focused on you. You're more focused on making sure that your department, your people, your staff, your team is taken care of in light of all of these business priorities. So hold on, we need how many customer service reps for busy season? We need another 70. Look, Dan, you killed me. They should have told me this a little bit earlier. We will do the best that we can as an HR department, and we'll give them what they need. We know that that's a long-term priority and a focus for them, but yeah, we need to take care of ourselves. You are forecasting because you understand what the needs are, but your focus is still on you. And the apex of the model is when you have a long-term focus and when the majority of your focus, your planning, and your execution is on the future. So you maintain your current level of performance, but you also have certain work streams that add value to the long-term priority. So what does that mean? Yeah, we're going to maintain payroll. Yeah, we're going to maintain recruitment. Yeah, we could develop our people, but we're also in parallel with that going to ask questions like, what is the long-term focus? How do we need to be planning for the next 5 years? Have we really looked at our workforce and the way that this company is set up so that we could be a market leader and maintain market leader status for the next 5 to 10 years? What skills do we need in order to gain this customer segment in the next 10 years? And if it takes 5 years to really develop those skills, then you know what? We need to get started with our plan to develop those skills in 2022. What are we doing from a succession standpoint? We see that 30% of our executive leadership team is going to retire in the next 4 years. And it takes us 5 years to properly develop an effective executive leader. So now we're late. Because if they're leaving in 4 years and we need 5 years to develop our people, we're late. So fulfilling says that we're looking at the long-term business needs of the organization. We're maintaining our current level of performance as HR, but we're looking at the future and we're also scoping for the future. So let's get into each one. How do we build capability in each quadrant? Now, one thing I do want to say is that this content and this model is being developed as the 2021 book for WHI. So there's a lot going on in here. I will do my best to cover this in 45 minutes to 50 minutes, but this is really built as more of a half-day workshop. So if we don't answer all of your questions on the chat, we will create a FAQ document and I will provide written responses. But also if you want to have some further offline conversation, we can do that too, all right? But just please bear that in mind because there's a lot more to this than just 45 minutes of content. So functioning. Functioning is when you are in that short-term focus and you're primarily focused on your HR department. The number one strategy that you need to do is you need to elevate your perspective and you need to create more long-term awareness. What happens in HR sometimes is we get so caught up in the regular run-of-the-mill things that we do every day that we forget to look up and see the forest for the trees. So if you have an HR department that is in the category that's called functioning, what we need for them to do is we need for them to get more involved with the business. We need to train our HR department for more strategic thinking. We need to make sure that individuals understand that, yes, it is important to, and Rose, do you mind passing me a piece of tissue? I think I'm getting excited about this model. I'm getting quite excited about this model. We need to train individuals for strategic thinking, and we need to make sure that they elevate their perspective and they understand that it's not just enough to stay where you are, head buried, working on what it is that you have to do. HR is an enabler. If any of you have attended any workshops that I've delivered, you should remember that theme. HR is there to support the business. So if our focus is only on the short term and only on our needs as a department, I hate to say it, guys, and I know people have said that I use definitive language in my workshops, but A fact is a fact. We failed. We have failed. So if you are in the category where you are functioning, I don't want you to leave this workshop being downtrodden or beat down, but I want you to understand that there's an opportunity for you to do more and operate on a higher level. And to help you get closer to that, I would encourage more involvement with business units, partnering with them, understanding what their needs are. I would encourage us to have more training for strategic thinking so that we can think bigger. It may also be useful to even speak to some individuals and see what their view is of your HR department. When you start asking individuals for feedback, you'll be surprised what they would tell you. And then last note about this is that a lot of our processes are broken. And because our processes are broken, we have no room to actually rise above and see the forest for the trees. I remember doing a consulting gig with a particular company, and I'll try my best to make this information random so that they're not called out. But they had a process where they prepared information for every type of employee transaction, but it was really a waste of time. They spent, oh, good grief. They probably spent in a 2-week basis, maybe about 15, 20, 25 hours on this process every 2 weeks. And through our consulting and through our partnership, we were able to design an automated tool that took them 1 hour. So now you've saved 24 hours of work. So what it means is that you had a broken process that prevented you from doing other value-adding work. So when we think about functioning, functioning is focused on the short term and only my HR needs. When we think about foreseeing, foreseeing on the other hand, talks about a short-term focus. We're starting to uncover what the business needs are, and we're becoming more company focused. So in this instance, we're maintaining the status quo, and now we're starting to learn a little bit more about what the business needs from us. So how do we go and make that even deeper and make that relationship and correlation stronger? What we need to do is we need to support deeper partnering and create long-term awareness. And in instances like this is where we just need to spend time with operational leaders. Listen, as HR leaders, we should be almost to the point where we can carry on in-depth conversations with operational leaders because we understand what they do. Our success for the long term in terms of foresight and anticipation is understanding our business. You need to understand your business model like an operational leader, period. And as you start understanding it more, another major strategy here that I would encourage you to do is you need to show short-term wins. I hate to say it, but in a lot of respects, HR is operating from a deficit. Most business leaders don't respect what we do. The research shows it across almost 30,000 companies worldwide that they feel we are reactionary. So we can't just tell them that we want to understand their needs. We need to now create opportunities to show wins. And what does that mean? That could mean that we partner with business leaders and actually come up with solutions and then deliver on those solutions and report back and show the impact that it had. So, Mr. Leader, you know, we talked about this executive leadership program back in 2020. It's now Q1 2021, and this is how we've developed these leaders. This particular candidate here is 37% ready to assume this role. And by mid-year, this candidate will be 52% ready. This is our recommendation to fill this executive spot. If you feel that candidate is not ready, this is the second and the third candidate, and these are the steps and the strategies that we have in place for your approval to get them ready. That's a win. An operational leader cannot deny if you are adding impact, but the only way they could acknowledge or deny it is if you show them. So we have to create opportunities for HR win. We also need to train for critical thinking and business acumen. Sometimes we can't operate on a higher level because we simply don't know how to. We simply don't know how to. And that could be from a lack of skill set. That could also be from a lack of business information that has been shared with us. You know, an HR leader said to me, won't say their name, they said, I've been asking for the strategic plan for my company for years, but no one is giving it. No one gives it to us. No one discusses it with us because they don't feel we need to know. So it could be that we also lack business information, which is hindering us from operating on a higher level. So when we think about foreseeing talks about, yeah, we still have a short-term focus because we're starting to understand what those business needs are. And we're gaining that knowledge, but we're not there yet. We're not there yet. Forecasting, on the other hand, says, you know what? We have a fairly good handle on what these long-term needs are, and we understand that they're priority, but I need to take care of my shop first. So I'm sorry, the focus is, I am going to make sure that HR is taken care of in light of what these business needs are. And as HR leaders, that is a responsibility that we have. We have to manage the departments that we have. We have to make sure that our people are taken care of, they're upskilled, they're properly aligned, they have the tools and technologies and everything to be effective. But we can't stop there. HR is an enabler. So if we have an understanding of what long-term needs are, but we're not thinking about our role in supporting those long-term needs for the future, again, we've missed the mark. So how do we get back on point to hit the mark? We need to reinforce for business impact and execution abilities. What does that mean? In the forecasting phase, we're not lacking awareness. We know what we need to do, but we're just not having the impact that we need to have. And I believe in 9 out of 10 instances, it might be because we don't know how to execute to make it happen. We don't know how to execute to make it happen. I would encourage you to write this down. Execution trumps strategy. Always. Execution eats strategy for lunch. Every company has a great strategy at the beginning of the year, but at the end of the year, they're winners and losers. And those companies that are losers are those that don't know how to execute and be agile for the future. So when we think about forecasting, we need to think, how do we build that execution agility? How do we get HR to understand that they're not the entire puzzle, but they're just a piece in the puzzle? Probably the most important piece, because competitive advantage comes from people. Your money, your technology, your physical assets, those could only go to a certain place. Physical assets have to be managed by people. Financial assets have to be managed by people. Intellectual assets come from people. So people are the single most important thing. So we need to know, how do we execute well to show business impact? And in some instances, how do we just shift the focus from me to we? Again, I won't call any names, but I spoke to a particular executive level leader, and they're like, man, Hepburn, listen, really? I'm just focused on my team because this company trying to kill us. They're trying to kill us. So all I'm trying to do is make sure that my team is taken care of. And, you know, I'm a couple years away from retirement, and I just trying to see if I can make it through. I don't want to be insensitive because I don't know what that leader or that person has gone through, and I'm not going to pretend to. But as I listened to what he or she said, I just felt within myself that they're missing an opportunity. If you're only focused on the business needs and what those business needs mean for your HR department, you've missed the mark, because we're here to support the business. And in a lot of instances, I see HR department take that me approach. I'm going to protect me and make sure me and mine are good. And then they do a disservice to the business. So when we're thinking about forecasting says that we understand business needs, but we still keep a HR department driven focus to those needs. And in more instances than not, I see where that happens because one, we don't know how to execute. We don't understand the business impact that we can have. And in some instances, we're too concerned about protecting ourselves and not supporting the businesses that we are a part of. HR is a piece of the puzzle. HR is not the entire puzzle. The last quadrant. So in fulfilling is when you have laser clarity surrounding what business needs are. You are moving in lockstep with operational and executive leaders. You are involved in discussions. They value your opinion. You are adding to strategy and plans, whether it's at the strategic level, tactical level, or the operational level. And HR is a major contributor to the value and to the performance of the organization. So here, we are executing on future business needs while still maintaining and supporting the needs of our HR department. So we're maintaining the status quo, but we also are investing and dedicating resources to understanding and executing on future business needs. So we're doing both. And depending on the maturity of your organization, depending on the maturity of your HR team, depending on the extent of the collaboration with executive and senior leaders, depending on the market peculiarities that you have to deal with, that percentage could vary. You could be 50% operational processes, 50% future and scoping. It could be 75% operational processes, 25% future and scoping, it varies. But when we think about fulfilling means that we need to maintain strength over time, and we need to show how HR programs are having direct organizational impact. Leaders support programs and initiatives that show return. One of the primary reasons why we get little to no support as HR is because we cannot show the return of our programs. Well, Mr. Senior Leader, I feel that it would really be good to have a new wellness program. All right, that sounds good. How is it going to benefit us? Well, I think it'll make our team more engaged. I think it would reduce our cost. I feel that it would help us to continue to be shown as an employer of choice in the community. We hear a lot of I think, I feel, I hypothesize. When we are in the fulfilling stage, we need to show objectively the benefits that have happened or the benefits that we forecast. So Mr. Senior Leader, I've come up with a proposal for a wellness program. I'd like to introduce this wellness program in 3 stages. The first stage will start in Q1 2020, and based on the benefit and sick information that we've built into this model, we feel that we could have a 5% reduction in our sick expenditure in Q1. By the end of Q2, we feel that that reduction can increase to 13%, which is $675,000 of operational costs that we can save. And I'm sure you can understand and appreciate what that means to us, Mr. Leader, because right now we spend $13 million on benefit costs that if we could better manage, it would minimize business disruption, it would lead to greater engagement, and it would help our financial performance in an industry and in an environment that we already know has been impacted by COVID-19. Now, in order for me to do this, like I said, in Q1, we're going to see $675,000 in operational savings. All I need in Q1 is $250,000. So it means that we're going to net $400,000 of benefits in Q1. If it does not work in Q1, you and I can agree to stop the program. That's a very different conversation than I feel, I think, and I kind of hope that this will happen. So when we start talking about fulfilling, we have to create clear linkage between HR activity and business change. And Keisha, I see I'm over by 3 minutes, I'll wrap up. So what we need to think about is how do we even report our HR success factors? What does HR success even look like? I've spoken to some HR professionals and they can't even answer that question. So as an HR department, if you don't even know what success looks like, how can the leaders that we support know when you are being successful? They can't. So we need to think, what is the linkage? What impact are we objectively showing to the business? How are we measuring and managing and showing our success factors and actively reporting on those success factors? I'm a part of another association in town. And one of the things that our executive leadership team is talking about now is the difference between knowing and showing. You can know that you provide value, but nobody cares until you show them. So as HR leaders, we need to balance between knowing and showing. Well, Hepburn, man, I don't know why they're stressing me so much. I already work 70 hours a week. You would think that they would know that. Yeah, I would think that they would know that, but have you actually shown them the results of your 70 hours of work? What impact are you having in the business? And have you reported that back out? Another thing, which is hugely important when we think about fulfilling, is we need to proactively meet with operational leaders and do needs assessments, and we need to be trained on how to manage stakeholders. I've literally seen instances where someone leaves someone's office and got a hell no, it ain't gonna happen, we ain't have no money, you out of your mind. And then 2 hours later, I walk in, and as I'm walking out, everybody's laughing, and we got a yes. So I think sometimes too, it's in the style of how we deal with operational leaders. Some operational leaders flat out say, I don't want to deal with HR. I don't want to deal with HR. They don't understand what we're doing. I don't get any real support. And the style in terms of dealing with some of these individuals, I just don't have time for it. So we need to be trained on how to manage stakeholders. People will always do more for you if they like you, period. So we now need to think about things like, how do we promote likability? How do you become someone when they see you, they want to stop and talk to you? How do you become someone who is seen more as a pleasure and less of a pain? Because if people can take that filter down, they would work with you more. Again, borrowing a phrase, faster, further, longer, stronger. All right, so when we think about fulfilling, I see that I'm past time. When we think about fulfilling, we're talking about having tremendous clarity on what long-term operational needs are. As HR, we are maintaining our status quo in terms of the current operational processes, but we understand what those business needs are. We're planning for those business needs, and we're also executing on what those future business needs are now, so that we can be ahead of the game and we can have more foresight and be more proactive and less reactive. In conclusion, I'll make this quick. Being anticipatory is a required skill set. I said it in the beginning, organization and leaders that anticipate always succeed, period. Look at any company, look at any leader, and if being anticipatory does not meet their top 10 skill set, let me know who they are. Let's have a conversation about it, because I'd be very surprised. HR must shift from being reactive to more future focused. The 4sight model is one model that can help with that. I won't be naive and say that there aren't others, but I think that this is a good one that can be practically applied. So if you so wish, you can feel free to use it, and reach out to me if you want any further support or if you're interested in the book for 2021. And 4sight requires action, time, and commitment. You don't stumble into being anticipatory. It takes time. I remember working with a previous leader for a particular company I did some consulting for. And when they were finishing the consulting report, as we were wrapping up our engagement, she put a note on there and she said, Wellington, I have to tell you that almost every single time you came to me with something, it was something that you thought about that I hadn't even gotten to as yet. And that's what being anticipatory is. On the screen is all of my contact information for those of you who don't know how to get in contact with me. In the interest of time, I would encourage you to take a photo of it. And I can also send it out after this presentation. But at this point, I'd now like to hand it over to Keisha to take us through our Q&A segment. So over to you, Keish. And since I've been a few minutes over, Keish, I think we could do Q&A until about maybe 2:25, and then we could start to wrap up.
All right, thank you, Wellington. Very good presentation, very good insight, very good information. The chat has been quite lively, with persons chiming in. We have persons in the business that have given feedback. We have trainers and consultants that have given feedback, persons in HR that have given really, really good feedback during the presentation. And I'd just like to share some. Initially, we have one person who is a business partner saying that I am looking in from the business point of view, and I'm sorry, I always want more from HR, but trying to ensure that I have the right conversation with them. So for me, that's saying that the business wants to partner with us. The business wants to hear what does HR have to say, and are we having the right conversations with them and guiding those conversations? Because based on this comment, that is what the business wants. Another comment that was in the chat earlier came from a trainer,
right?
An external trainer. I can be working with HR professionals in these categories. This sort of explains what I experience.
Yes.
So I have permission, and Keisha, if you can unmute your mic, just give us in 1 minute. Tell us about your experience. Just give us some feedback and some insight into what you've been seeing as an external trainer with your relationship and your experiences with HR.
Hi, Wellington. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Wellington, for a great presentation. You know, I almost felt like I was in church because because I, you know, I keep saying amen. I keep, you know, because I, as a trainer and a training consultant who comes into organizations of all sizes, all industries, I've gotten to the point many times, and my husband and I go back and forth on this quite often about how I feel. Coming in as a trainer, asking certain questions. So I come in not only as a trainer, but I'm an entrepreneur. So I think at that business level, consistently, in terms of me wanting to understand the business so I can tie training back to it.
Yes.
And so I ask those business questions, you know, what are the outcomes that this training will produce? What I remember asking a company before, you know, coming back in to do a customer service presentation, do you have any numbers to speak to whether or not the level of customer service that your employees are giving are impacting the bottom line? So I ask these type of questions, whether it be a new company or a company that I'm working with again.
Yes.
And very, very rarely do I get those answers from, you know, the HR professionals that I work with. And sometimes I just brush it off, like, okay, let me just, you know, as I'm told often, you know, just go when you're only being hired to train. And so okay, put on my trainer hat and you know, deliver.
Yes.
But as a trainer who's really focused on results and want to know that my training is producing results without having that business strategy and data to tie the training to, it's very difficult. And it's been very difficult to have those conversations with HR professionals, because frankly, they haven't been able to give that data. You know, whether they say, I don't know, or whether they say, okay, the CEO has it, where, you know, I get answers, but it's not the answers that help me to, you know, tie the training and the results back to what the company is looking for.
Yes, absolutely. Listen, Keisha, it's real. And there's such a big difference between speculating and telling me speculation than showing me. And operational leaders, especially executive level leaders, it's about results. It's not about what you think and feel. It's about what you can either show has happened or what you can reasonably show will happen in the future. Results. And you know, this comment may be for another time, but one of the skill sets that we're lacking as HR is the whole operational talent analytics, data visualization, and knowing how even to frame business cases from that perspective. Because a lot of the reasons why we get no's sometimes it's not necessarily that it's not a good idea. We just don't know how to position it.
Exactly. And even when I come in and try to ask a question, so I can help position it, because I want to win the business, right? So I want to help position that proposal right as well. But, you know, not having the data to even to produce anything that's supported is really, it really does. That's one of the pet peeves that I have in my training industry. That's one of the pet peeves. So you kind of articulated it in a way that I've not seen it before.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Wellington. Thank you, Kishal. A question from one of the attendees and tying into what we've been saying, Wellington, how do we shift the mindset to bring HR to the forefront in the business?
You know, I think that's a very involved question. So I could probably give you about 5 or 6 points on that. So whoever tabled the question, let's talk a little bit more offline. But as an immediate step to take, I would say that it starts with 1, letting the business know that we want to rebrand ourselves. And guys, listen, if some of my responses are just very direct, I'm sorry, but the facts are the facts. In some instances, we failed. And in a lot of instances, the organizations don't fully respect us for what we do. So I think the first thing, and I'm not saying that that's right or wrong or here nor there, because there are reasons for why that happened. Some positive, some negative. But I think the first thing to do is to call it out. To call it out and say, look, we know that historically we've not been hitting the mark. So call it out, call a spade, and then make it clear that you want to change your branding, you want to change your positioning, and you want to partner with the business to do that. And then the third thing is, please don't overpromise and underdeliver. Sometimes what we do as HR organizations is we take that approach and then we overpromise and underdeliver. It's always better to underpromise and overdeliver. So my response to that would be honest, look at your performance in the past, and call out when you've not hit the mark. Make a commitment to the organization, whether it's the senior level leaders or executive level leaders, to say that you want to improve. And then thirdly, identify some things that are within your reach that allow you to show impact, allow you to show short-term win, and then deliver like crazy on those things. Because you have to remember that even in the natural scheme of things, the way that God designed us, we have to learn how to stand up first. No, well, actually, you learn how to crawl first. You learn how to stand up. Then you learn how to walk. Then you learn how to jog. Then you learn how to sprint. So we can't go from learning how to crawl to sprinting. So find some of those short-term wins and just knock them out of the ballpark.
Thanks, Wellington. Great information, great feedback. And as we, the first thing you said was we have to call it out. But as HR professionals, when we are getting ready to call it out, we have to be ready for the next step, because it's nothing like calling it out and then you get the question, okay, so what? What do you use? What's going to be next? What is your feedback? What are your recommendations? What is your plan? And then you stand dumbfounded like, oh, I just wanted to call it out. That's the stage I was at. So there are some competencies that HR professionals also need to develop in order to be ready when we do call it out. Let me see, okay, here is the plan. In your view, what are the top 3 competencies that HR professionals will need to move from functioning to fulfilling?
That's a great question, Keish. I'll give you more than 3, and then no particular order. 1 is knowing how to build relationships. A lot of us work in HR, and a lot of us feel that we've been there a while. I've been there not that long, only about 11 years, in comparison to some others on the line. But knowing how to manage relationships, huge. People will always do more for you if you have a good rapport with them. Now, I'm not saying be fake, but I'm saying know how to manage people. There are different personality styles. Some people like to talk long, some people like to talk short, some people want to talk forever, but their kids, some people you don't bring their kids up at all. Some people exercise an hour every day and they jog, so know how to manage relationships, pay attention to the fine details, and utilize those details when you partner with individuals. I would also say knowing and having strong business acumen. Nothing replaces business acumen. When you sit in operational meetings, first of all, you don't want to be lost. And second, you don't want to sound like you don't know what you're saying when you try to participate. So we have to build strong business acumen. Thirdly is, I would say, data analytics. We have to be able to show operational results and impact in terms of reporting, analytics, dashboards, charts, visualization, and the like. I would also say too, HR professionals have to stay on the pulse of knowledge. Again, a strong statement, but facts are facts. Some of us are operating from outdated knowledge. What you studied 15, 20, 30, 35 years ago may or may not be relevant now. So we need to stay on the pulse of educating, developing ourselves, making sure that we're staying on top of different frameworks and policies and things like that. Because if you're operating from an old framework, no matter what you say, you will come across that way. I remember speaking to an executive level leader at another company I worked for. And said leader said to me, and I kid you not, this is almost word for word, he called me up to his office, and I'll just call him Bob to make the example easy. I said, Bob, what's going on? He's like, man, what took you so long? I was like, what you talking about? You weren't supposed to have this meeting with me. You were supposed to have this meeting with my executive. Man, I don't have time for her. Listen, she's operating from the Stone Age. I do not have time for her. But I don't mind talking to you. You seem kind of sharp. And I'll never forget that conversation, because what he was talking about was the fact that this person was just outdated in what they knew. So those would be some of the things I would share. Again, there are books written on this stuff. So for whomever would have posed that question, if you want a deep answer, please feel free to reach out to me after today's call.
Okay. Thank you, Wellington. I want to get some more feedback from the attendees. In particular, we have, like I mentioned earlier, from the business. We've heard from Antoine. Antoine, if you are able to just give us some more insight and feedback regarding the conversation that the business is looking to have with HR. Tell us a bit more about that and give us your insight and feedback. HR professionals on the call today, as well as some persons in the business. If you're going to mute your mic for us. Is Antoine still there?
I think he's keeping us in suspense.
I think so. I'll come back to him. So another question we have, what would be the first step that you would encourage an HR department or HR leader to take to become more anticipatory in 2020?
In 2020, so 2020 is a unique year. I think the most immediate step, considering COVID-19 and what we've gone through, is I would encourage HR leaders to work on this competency called change agility. So change agility says, how do we respond to change? How do we embrace it? How do we not view it as an enemy? And how do we become flexible and agile to deal with any type of change that comes, period. I remember about 15 years ago, I was working with an executive level leader at a particular company, and said leader and we were working on a bonus program in Microsoft Access. If that person's on the line, they know exactly who they are. And man, the bonus figures needed to be loaded into our core system the next day. And I was the analyst, this person was the VP at the time. And we finished all of the calculations around, I think maybe like 11:45 that night. And I kid you not, right when I hit save, the whole Access database crashed. And I remember the executive actually screaming from his office. And we both looked at each other and we're like, listen, this is important, but we need to go home. On top of that, today is my wife's birthday. I'm gonna run upstairs, grab something from one of the stores that's still open in the hotel, and I'm going home, you know? So I give that example to show that, you know, we could have cowered, and we could have said, look, we tried, thing crashed, just deal with it. But what did we do? We went home, got a good night's rest, or semi-good night's rest, and came back the next day, 6, 7 o'clock in the morning, built it from scratch. So my response would be for HR professionals in this time is be prepared for the unexpected. Be prepared to be flexible and agile, because a lot of the strategies that would have been developed earlier in this year are going to be thrown out of the water. A lot of the there's going to be a lot of mindset change in our organizations as we have employees come back to the workforce. There's going to be a lot of uncertainty and a lot of angst, even surrounding COVID-19, unemployment levels in the country. I mean, we have more macro issues happening in other countries, like with some of the racism issues in the US. So my advice would be to read up a little bit on change agility, read up a little bit on how to be flexible and agile moving forward, and also know how to adjust as best as you can real time. So that would be my advice. If you want a supporting resource to help you, WHI is in the process of publishing a book that talks about change agility that should be out in about 2 to 3 weeks.
Okay. Thank you, Wellington. We also still getting some feedback in the chat. Elizabeth would have just spoke to change agility as well. So it's very important. That is, of course, a key competency that HR professionals and leaders must have as we navigate and go through the steps of the 4sight model. In the interest of time, we'll put one more question out, and if anyone else has comments, please in the chat and I will share them. So the leaders in my company don't respect the opinion that HR provides. As such, they purposely exclude our contribution. What advice do you have to assist with this?
So that's a good question. I would say the two things that I said before. They probably don't respect you, or maybe not you, let me be fair. They probably don't respect your organization, your HR organization, because of past failures. So whether those failures are valid failures or whether those failures were for factors outside of your control, the fact of the matter is you are where you are. So I think the biggest thing there is to call it out, say that you realize that your department or your organization has not been as impactful and as successful as you could have been in the past. After that, you then need to have a plan to improve your impactfulness within the next 1 month to 3 months. And you need to create wins. And those wins have to be wins that are mutually beneficial. So they have to benefit your HR organization and also operational leaders. If we want to talk about percentage differentials, they should benefit the organization more than they benefit you. The organization, I hate to say it, but they don't care about your HR department. They don't care about your struggles. They care about what you can do for them. So in this instance, the only way that you can change someone's mindset positively is to show them how you are going to benefit them in real terms, in real, practical, measurable, beneficial terms to help them change their perspective. People don't want to hear excuses. And sometimes when I speak to HR leaders, I hear a lot of excuses. Well, they don't understand. And if they was here 3 years ago, they would know why it's like that. And those things are realities, and I respect those. I do. I'm really not trying to be negative. But in that instance where you don't have respect, you need to call out the fact that your department has not provided the value that it should for whatever reasons or reason, and that you have a plan to change it. And you need to make sure that it's communicated back to the operational and executive leaders. And if there's an opportunity to even create some organization-wide showcase of that impact, then the more the better. Because slowly over time, as people see more wins and more wins, then their perspective would change. So that would be my advice. That would be my advice. And
Thank you.
yeah, and Keisha, I just want to put one quick insert in there. In the beginning, I just wanted to make sure that I was clear. So when I brought up the slide, which says all lives matter and that WHI is in support, I just want to make sure that everyone is clear that WHI is in support of no racial injustice, no racial profiling, but we are not in support of the riots and the looting and the fighting and the killing that is happening in certain countries around the world. So I just wanted to clarify that to make sure that we were abundantly clear and to make sure there was no ambiguity there.
Thank you, Wellington. And then to wrap up our Q&A session, I think it's important that we hear from the business. We had Antoine with his comments. Antoine was saying that I am looking in from the business point of view. I always want more from HR, but trying to ensure that I have the right conversation with them. So this will be our last point, and I think it's relevant to hear now in this live environment, some real feedback regarding what does the business want to hear. So Antoine, you have 1 minute to share with us quickly.
Yeah, go ahead, my brother.
Then we'll wrap up this segment of the session for today.
Oh, sorry. I think I heard you say 1 minute.
Yes, just we more time before, but.
Oh no, I wasn't sure. I was just breaking up a bit. That's fine.
1 minute, yes. Second.
Being on the both sides, Keisha, I think it's quite interesting. So I understand what HR should be delivering, or how HR thinks and how the business thinks. And I think I mentioned that point about more of a consultant. And what I really want to hear is, when we're talking, I'm not having to bring you up to speed so much. And I guess when I'm saying bring you up to speed, we're all in the same company.
Yes.
Somebody from HR sits around the table. So I heard the stories, or I guess I heard the perspectives as well about strategic objectives. So let's assume this is the environment where you understand the strategic objectives for the most part. And
Yes.
even just looking at that, really moving toward that continuum. I thought that slide that Wellington put up about the anticipation of needs and how consistently you do that, that's exactly what we sort of expect. Because by the time I get to you, or by the time you actually get to me, because you are being the consultant and also sitting at the table, you're not necessarily the one in the line. So I'm looking more from that strategic point of view and getting those answers even before I get to you, because you know what the challenges are, as opposed to this personnel point of view. And like I put the comment, like, personnel was so 80s. You're not just doing the filing, you're not just doing the hiring, you're not just doing the comp and ban, or just making sure that I get paid, but you're really taking me to the next level. You're really telling me I can see down the road that you're going to have an issue here with succession. I see that we actually have some skill gaps, because we're supposed to send like all the evaluations and everything to HR. So it's really being that full consultant who is really not the first line of defense, but really more of a second line of defense, looking in, not necessarily from the outside because you're still in, but looking in and almost coming to me very quickly to address things. Because it's not, depending on the size of your organization, you ain't hiring someone every day.
Yeah.
Payroll isn't every day, and that's almost a process that not necessarily can run itself, but unless there are changes with overtime or people coming in or people leaving, there's very little that changes there. But there has to be somebody who's coming in from a strategic point of view to really give the guidance. And I think for me, that's really what I'm trying to get from an HR point of view, really having the hand, I guess, on the plow, I guess, but always ready to just move with. But you're coming to me even before I get to you, because you almost will anticipate what my challenges will be.
Awesome wrap up.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That was awesome to wrap up our Q&A session. Thank you so much. So we've from our participants. Wellington, thank you again for an extremely informative session. We have a lot of persons asking about getting the presentation, so I will allow you in a few seconds to go ahead and give some more information about how they can get this presentation. But Overall, we've heard that companies and leaders that anticipate always succeed, and that includes us as HR. In every problem, there is opportunity. There is a gap between what the business feels versus what HR feels, and that is the comparison of the HR impact. And I think at the end of that slide, everyone was just like, wow, that was reality. HR is an enabler, and execution trumps strategy. So we would have shared some of those quotes in the chat, but please, Wellington, will give us some more information about getting this presentation as well as getting a deeper dive, because this was, high level overview, and there is so much more that WHI has to present and share on this topic. So we thank you for that. We'll just give a quick overview of the companies that have collaborated for today's session. So we ask for 3 minutes. If your time is at time, Wellington.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So okay, so the first thing I'll comment on, the first thing I'll comment on is the presentation. So like I said, this is the 2021 book for WHI. So I'm sure you can appreciate that I can't really share the presentation. A lot of this information is still in the process of being copyrighted. We plan to turn it into an academic model that we'll see in some of the textbooks and such. However, if you do have any follow-up questions, reach out to me. I'm here to answer them. If you would like to have a workshop facilitated for your organization, we can do that. And then outside of that, I would say stay tuned for the book release in 2021, Lord's willing. Now, one of the things we pride ourselves on here at WHI is time management. It is 2:30. If any of you need to drop off of the call, we respect that. We thank you for your time. But for those that can remain, I did go over by about 7 or 8 minutes. So if you could permit us another 8 minutes, we would greatly appreciate that. So thank you for that for those that can stay. Final comment I want to make before I hand it over to Keish, and she'll talk a little bit about her companies, is that, listen, if we don't learn how to anticipate, we're going to be left behind. We're going to be left behind. So there's a tremendous urgency for us to know how to anticipate, where to anticipate, which areas to anticipate. And organizational leaders are looking to us for that when we think about our people resources. The title that we go by is human resources. It means that we have a responsibility for advising, understanding, and hoping to optimize those human resources that we have. Business leaders deal primarily with financial, physical, and sometimes intellectual, but we have the responsibility for the human resources. Over to you, Keish. Tell us a little bit about your companies, and then I shall wrap up.
Okay. So I mentioned Dragonfly Media as well as Integrity Risk Services are two companies that I'm the director for that I currently run. And Dragonfly Media is a multimedia company where we provide a range of services ranging from photography, videography, aerial photography, so that's a lot of the drone work, as well as advertising, printed and digital, commercials, flyers, business cards. And, we've had to experience adapting and adjusting and 4sight and everything in what we do for our business. And so that is one aspect that we carry out. And we also enjoy creating innovative ways to allow persons to still capture their memories. Even during this pandemic, we have had to evolve. We've had to be, quite fulfilling in our role as an organization, as a company. So that is Dragonfly Media. And then we also have Integrity Risk Services. Integrity Risk Services functions, as a insurance company as well as individuals, where we provide consulting services as well as risk assessment in the areas of claims for personal use as well as for companies. So we have had tons of calls, most recently with Hurricane Dorian, where persons were asking, okay, what do I need to do? What does my insurance contract say? What is the value of my home? We come out and we do home assessments, as well as we provide one-on-one consultation for businesses as well as individuals for insurance services. We have over 20 years experience in the insurance industry. And so our goal is to always manage each matter with efficiency, transparency, and of course, integrity. And another business that we didn't include on the flyer, but we also have Islandscape Lawn Care. And Wellington, you talked about fulfilling as an aspect of HR, but even as an aspect of business, how do we anticipate our customers' needs? We know that we're in now, the hurricane season is here again, very quickly. And what we have been doing as a part of this third business that we own is we are coming out and offering residential and corporate landscaping services, but we also have hurricane tree trimming services that we offer. And for anyone that is on this call that would call us at 357-8608 and mention that you heard about us through the C3 series, we will offer you a free home assessment, free property assessment, as well as a free quote for any tree trimming or hurricane tree trimming and preparedness services that you may need for your property. So again, the number is 357-8608, and that's Islandscape Lawn Care. If you need any assistance or any sort of consultation with your insurance matters, whether it's personal claims, home claims, contracts, please reach out to us at Integrity, and then Dragonfly Media as well for all of your multimedia services. We will be able to provide them for you. Thanks, Wellington.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let me talk a little bit about the C3. So let me just throw this up on the screen again. So you should see the schedule for the C3. Well, it's a tongue twister. So you see we have a couple more interesting topics. The next one is going to be the new normal. How do we reintegrate teams after crisis? We know that Prime Minister Dr. Menace has made it clear that tomorrow things are opening back up. So we have team members coming back into the office, and we need to know how to navigate that. And we're not going to stumble across that. There has to be an approach for reintegrating teams. And next Sunday, Lord's willing, we'll talk a little bit about that. On the 21st is Father's Day, so we'll take a pause. But on the 28th, we'll also have our featured speaker, and I believe Derek's on the line, Derek Smith, who, in my opinion, is one of the best risk management professionals we have locally. So we're going to talk a little bit about how do we develop organizational agility for the future. Organizations don't become agile by happenstance or by chance. We need to think, how do we build in that agility for our organizations and our teams? And then on July 5th, we're going to wrap up the series. We're going to wrap it up, and we're going to have a surprise guest speaker who will be talking to us a little bit about what we've done and the impact of this series and some of the lives that has changed. I also want to point out to you that in the one more minute that I have, that we provide certificates. So if you're interested in purchasing a certificate, you will get an email from me maybe about 30 minutes after this webinar saying that you've participated. Each certificate is $4.99 US. And I want you to know that we're working with 2 international bodies to actually gain credits for these sessions. I'm hoping that they would allow us to retroactively apply those credits, meaning that if an individual watches the YouTube recording, they can also gain credits for it too. So know that not only is this a good keepsake, but it is something that can help you to have continuing ed credits in the future, all right? Time is up, so my final comment would be our book is coming in another 2 to 3 weeks. It's called Creating an Agile Mind, and it talks about how do we promote personal change agility for us to become better. Thank you for your time today, guys. Like I would have said in the beginning, this is recorded, so look for it sometime this week on our WHI channel. But WHI, Integrity Risk Services, and Dragonfly Media would like to thank you for your time today, and thank you for your participation. All right, take care, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, take care. Cheers.